Something shattered on the porch, a hard crack, then a scatter of smaller clicks across wood. The midnight quiet held its breath. Only the rain kept talking. Jack Monroe stood in the dark with one sock missing hand on the hallway wall. He listened for the second sound that always followed trouble in this house. A sleepy voice, a cough, a question. Nothing. Leo's door was ajar. A nightlight painted the carpet in a thin stripe. Jack exhaled. The doorbell chimed. It was a plain, polite sound. Tonight it landed like a fist. Jack glanced at the clock above the microwave. 12:03 a.m. He set his mug on the entry table. The coffee had gone cold. He crossed the living room, careful not to wake the floorboards. The doorbell rang again, then stopped short like the finger had slipped. Jack slid the deadbolt open and pulled the door inward. Cold air rushed in, smelling of wet cedar and pavement. Under it was something sharper, clean, and expensive. Claire Sterling stood on his porch. His CEO, his problem, the woman who could look at a week of work and call it safe without blinking. She was soaked through. Blonde hair clung to her cheeks in dark ropes. Water dripped off her lashes and down her throat, disappearing into the collar of a coat that looked wrong for weather like this. At her feet lay a broken ceramic planter. A fern had been thrown sideways, soil smeared into the boards. A jagged shard of white glaze caught the porch light. Claire followed Jack's eyes and flinched. "I did not mean to." Jack did not move aside. The cold crept into his bare foot. "Do you know what time it is?" Thunder rolled somewhere beyond the trees. Claire's shoulders jumped. She forced her voice steady. "I need to come in." Jack's mouth went tight. "If you came to fire me, you could have waited until morning." "I did not come to fire you." The words came out quick. "I read your email." Jack saw it again in his mind, plain and final, typed at his kitchen table, while Leo slept down the hall. The file attached, the line he refused to soften. "Tomorrow afternoon, I will be at my son's STEM expo." "You read it," he said, "so you know I am not staying late." Claire's gaze flicked past him into the house. A backpack by the bench, sneakers kicked off. A small framed photo on the shelf. Leo, at 8, grin wide, leaning into a woman with warm brown eyes. Jack's wife. The glass held fingerprints where Leo touched it. Claire's throat worked. She pulled her gaze back to Jack, and for the first time he saw her hands. They shook. "Then why are you here?" he asked. Rain gathered at the edge of his doormat and slid in dark beads onto the floor. Claire's coat dripped. Her perfume mixed with the smell of wet soil. She lifted her chin like she was bracing for impact. "After tonight," she said, and her voice snagged, "you will not look at me the same way." Jack stared at her. He should have shut the door. He should have protected the quiet. Instead, he thought of Leo's model city on the dining table streets, cut from cardboard, tiny solar panels made from foil. Thought of the promise he had made, then watched himself break it in slow motion. Claire stood there soaked and trembling, and still she did not step back. Jack stepped back instead. For a second she stayed frozen as if she did not trust the invitation. Then she crossed the threshold. Water dotted his hardwood floor. Jack grabbed a towel from the hook by the bathroom and tossed it to her. She caught it, surprised, then pressed it to her hair. "Keep your voice down," Jack said low. "My son is asleep." Claire nodded once. He led her to the kitchen without turning on the overhead light. A small lamp above the sink cast a warm circle on the counter. The house smelled like dish soap and the faint sweetness of hazelnut creamer. Leo insisted it made coffee less mean. Claire hovered by the table, shoulders raised, ready to run. Jack pulled a clean mug from the cabinet and set it down, then leaned against the counter, arms crossed, trying to slow his breathing. The rain tapped the window over the sink. In the living room, the clock ticked with quiet certainty. "Talk," Jack said. Claire lifted her eyes. Fear lived there, but so did something older, something that had been waiting. She drew in a breath like it hurt. 3 weeks earlier, Jack had walked through the glass doors of Sterling & Company with a cardboard coffee tray balanced in one hand and his portfolio tucked under the other, trying not to spill either as the lobby lights shone too bright on his tired face. The lobby smelled of stone and espresso. A neon sign over reception read, "Sterling," the letters crisp as a command. Jack's damp coat clung at the shoulders. He adjusted the cardboard tray, felt the heat of the cups through the paper, and offered a smile as the receptionist handed him a visitor badge. His name was spelled Monroe in thick black ink. He pressed it to his chest and headed toward the conference rooms. Jack followed the carpeted corridor toward the conference wing, the coffee tray tilting slightly with each step. The building felt too clean, too bright, like it had never known an unmade bed or a sink full of dishes. Glass walls revealed slices of other lives. People in sneakers and tailored jackets leaned over screens. Someone laughed at something on a phone, then tucked the sound away the second a manager walked by. He checked the badge again as if it might have changed its mind. Monroe, bold and final. A visitor in a place that ran on certainty. At 43, he was not used to being the new guy. He had spent 15 years building a reputation, one client, one pitch, one late-night revision at a time. Then his old agency lost 2 accounts in the same quarter. People stopped using words like restructure and started using words like necessary. Jack had sat across from HR in a room that smelled of copier toner and stale breath mints, nodding while his hands went cold. He told himself it was temporary. He told himself he would bounce back. He told himself a lot of things in the months that followed. That morning had started the way most mornings did, now with a small weight on his chest the second he opened his eyes. Not panic, not exactly. More like a mental list that appeared before his feet touched the floor. Lunch, permission slip, rent, refill, presentation. The house was quiet except for the refrigerator hum and rain ticking on the kitchen window. Seattle rain did not roar. It insisted. It kept time. Jack moved through the dim hallway and paused at Leo's door. He did not open it all the way. He only listened. The soft, steady rhythm of his son's breathing was the closest thing to relief Jack had learned to trust. In the bathroom, Jack ran water and looked at his own face in the mirror. There were more lines at the corners of his eyes than there used to be. Some came from squinting at screens. Some came from smiling too hard for Leo on days when the house felt too empty. On the counter, Leo's inhaler sat beside a plastic spacer, the bright blue cap like a toy trying to be cheerful. Jack checked it the way other fathers checked the weather. He pressed the canister lightly, felt the resistance. Not empty, but not full. He made a note in his head, then another note under it that said, "Stop making notes and actually do it." The kitchen smelled faintly of hazelnut. Leo had begged him to buy the creamer because it made coffee taste like dessert. Jack had agreed then, watched the price ring up, and felt the familiar sting in his stomach. Small comforts cost money now. Everything cost money now. Leo padded in a few minutes later, hair sticking up, pajama shirt twisted. He blinked at the table like it was a stage, and he had forgotten his lines. "Morning," Jack said. Leo opened the cabinet and pulled down a bowl without looking. 13 had arrived with a new kind of pride. Needing help felt like a crime. "Dad," Leo said, voice flat on purpose. "You forgot the slip. Again." Jack's phone buzzed on the counter. An email preview flashed across the screen. Subject line in all caps. A reminder from a landlord. Jack pushed the phone face down with his palm. Leo slid a crumpled permission slip across the table. The paper had been folded and unfolded enough times to soften at the edges. Jack reached for it. "Sorry, big day." Leo watched him sign with a pen that was almost out of ink. "You say that a lot." Jack tried for a smile. "Because it's true a lot." Leo poured cereal. The flakes sounded too loud in the quiet kitchen. "It's the North Sound STEM Expo on Friday," he said, as if reading from a script he had rehearsed to keep himself from sounding hopeful. "I know." Leo's eyes flicked up quick. "Do you, though?" Jack forced himself to meet his gaze. "I do." Leo nodded, then stared into his bowl like it held something more interesting than breakfast. "Okay." Jack had learned to hate that word. It was what Leo said when he did not want to argue. It was what Leo said when he did not want to get disappointed out loud. After breakfast, Jack packed Leo's lunch while answering 2 emails with his free hand. He found Leo's science notebook on the sofa, open to a sketch of a miniature street grid. Tiny arrows labeled airflow. A little box on the side read solar. Leo had always loved systems. When Nora was alive, she used to call it his superpower. She would lean over his shoulder hair falling forward and say, "Look at you building worlds." Nora's absence lived in the small things, the extra mug still hanging on the second hook, the shampoo bottle Jack could not bring himself to throw away, the space on the couch where she used to sit with her feet tucked under her, laughing at something on television that Jack did not find funny until he heard her laugh. Cancer did not take her gently. It took her in appointments and blood tests and hospital parking receipts and nights when Jack held her hand and pretended his palm was not shaking. It took her in the way Leo stopped asking certain questions because he could feel the answers before anyone spoke. 2 years later, Jack still woke up expecting for one split second to hear Nora in the kitchen. That second always ended the same way, with silence and a hard swallow. Rosa Alvarez knocked on the back door just after 8. She lived 3 houses down and had a key anyway, but she always knocked. Her respect was steady like that. "Morning, mijo," she said, stepping in with an umbrella dripping onto her boots. She held a tote bag that smelled like laundry soap and oranges. "Morning, Rosa." She glanced at the table, the permission slip with fresh ink, the laptop open, the tie draped over a chair like a surrender flag. She did not comment on any of it. She only looked at Leo. "You eat?" she asked him. Him. Leo lifted his bowl in a small salute. "Yeah." Rosa's eyes softened. She squeezed his shoulder as she passed. "Good. Big brain needs food." Leo almost smiled. Almost. Jack grabbed his coat, then hesitated. He crouched to Leo's level and adjusted the collar of Leo's hoodie the way Nora used to. "Friday," Jack said quietly. "I'll be there." Leo held his father's gaze for a beat longer than usual. "Okay," he said again, but this time the word carried a little less armor. Jack left the house with that promise pressed against the inside of his ribs. It was not a grand vow. It was a simple thing. That was what made it heavy. Now walking through Sterling & Co., he felt the promise shift as the building swallowed him. The elevator doors opened onto the creative floor. Music hummed low from somewhere. Walls were covered with mood boards and color swatches pinned in neat grids. Screens showed product shots and typography tests. A row of desks faced the windows like a cockpit. Beyond the glass, the city was slick and gray, the bay a sheet of steel. Jack's shoes squeaked once on the polished concrete. A few heads turned. He saw young faces, quick glances, assessments that tried to be polite. He tightened his grip on the coffee tray and continued toward the conference rooms, following the signs. Winter. He remembered hearing the company was called, before Claire rebranded it. That old name still lived in the building, in small ways in a faded plaque near the elevator, and in the whispered stories people told when they thought Claire was out of earshot. Sterling, though, was stamped everywhere now. On the glass, on the screens, on the lanyards. It looked less like branding and more like a claim. A junior designer stepped aside to let him pass, then offered a half smile. "New hire." Jack nodded. "First day." "Good luck," the designer said, and there was something honest in it. Jack reached the last corridor before the conference suite. The air changed there, cooler, quieter, the kind of quiet that signaled money. Through the glass wall of the main conference room, he saw a group gathered around a long table. Jackets hung on chairbacks like they had never known weather. A whiteboard at the far end held a clean, aggressive timeline in black marker. And at the center of it standing was Claire Sterling. Even from this distance, she was a presence. She did not lean, she did not fidget. Her hair was pulled back tight, a pale line that made her cheekbones look sharper. She held a tablet in one hand and gestured with the other, the movement precise as a conductor's. People looked at her when she spoke, not because they had to, but because their bodies had learned she was the sun in this room. Jack's first thought was absurd and immediate. She looks like she never forgets. His second thought arrived right after quieter. She looks tired anyway. A man in a navy blazer said something. Claire answered without smiling. Someone nodded quickly and wrote it down. The group moved like they were attached to her by invisible strings. Jack stood there a moment too long, watching through the glass coffee warming his palms, while his stomach turned. He thought of Leo at the kitchen table, pencil smudges on his fingers, drawing little streets that needed to make sense. He thought of the inhaler cap. He thought of the promise that was sitting fragile on Friday afternoon. He adjusted the visitor badge on his chest and felt the corner catch on the fabric of his shirt. He smoothed it down and took a slow breath through his nose, steadying himself. The smell of coffee rose bitter and familiar. Jack turned the handle and stepped into the room. The room fell into a pause the moment Jack entered, like a song losing its beat for half a second. A dozen faces turned, some curious, some blank, a few already back on their screens. Jack set the coffee tray on the sideboard near the door. The cups made a soft thud. He kept his hands on the cardboard a heartbeat longer than necessary, as if letting go might expose how much he needed something to hold. Claire Sterling did not offer a smile. She lifted her eyes from her tablet and pinned him with the kind of attention that made people straighten without thinking. "Mr. Marshall." Not Jack, not even a welcome. Just his last name, clean and sharp like it belonged on a contract. "Morning," Jack replied. His voice sounded steadier than he felt. "I brought coffee." A man with a lanyard and an expensive watch glanced at the tray with relief. Another woman reached for a cup, without looking at Jack, like taking coffee was an automatic function. Claire's gaze flicked to the tray and back. "We need results, not caffeine." A few people shifted in their chairs. No one laughed, no one challenged it. The air in the room carried the faint smell of whiteboard marker and polished wood. Rain tapped the glass walls behind Claire in a steady rhythm. Jack took an open seat near the middle, keeping his posture upright. He had sat in conference rooms his whole career. He had been the one walking clients through storyboards, selling them on a feeling they did not know how to name. He could do this. Still, his pulse kept climbing. An account lead cleared her throat. "We are here to review preliminary concepts for Rainier Outdoors fall campaign. The timeline is tight. The product launch is early October." Claire did not look at the account lead. She looked at Jack. "We reviewed your first pass," she said. Jack nodded. "I sent 3 directions. 2 safer, 1 more aggressive. I wanted to see what the team leaned toward." Claire slid her tablet across the table so the nearest people could see. A grid of Jack's mock-ups appeared. Bold photography, clean type, a color palette pulled from evergreen and basalt. Silence stretched. Someone took a sip of coffee too loudly. Claire tapped the screen once, then again. "These are competent." The word landed with a dull thump. Jack kept his expression neutral. "Competent is a good start." "It is not a promise," Claire replied. Jack felt the smallest pinch behind his ribs at that word promise, as if it had hooks. The creative team waited. Jack could sense them measuring him. New hire, older, a senior designer brought in to steady the ship or to be blamed if it sank. Claire continued, voice even. "Rainier is not paying us to look like every outdoor brand on the West Coast. They want to be remembered. They want to be talked about." Jack leaned forward slightly. "I agree. That is why Direction 3 uses negative space and a tighter narrative. It lets the product breathe." Claire's eyes did not soften. "It lets the product hide." A few heads dipped to screens, pretending to check notes, pretending not to witness the cut. Jack forced his focus on the work, not the sting. "What are you looking for exactly?" Claire turned her tablet so it faced her again. She did not answer immediately. She looked down, scrolling with a calm that suggested she had already decided. Then she said, "Innovation." The word sounded like a verdict. Jack held his hands together under the table, fingers interlaced so no one could see them tighten. "Innovation is not a switch. It is a process." Claire met his eyes. "Then start the process again." Jack took a breath through his nose. "You want a revision?" "I want a full redesign," she said, and her tone made full sound like final. "New story, new visual language, new everything." The account lead's pen paused mid-note, then started writing again fast. Jack's stomach dropped. By when? Claire's eyes did not leave his. "Next Friday." The room seemed to tilt. Jack heard the word Friday, and his mind snapped to Leo's school gym folding tables, poster boards, the smell of glue sticks. He saw Leo's face as clearly as if the boy were sitting in the empty chair beside him. Jack spoke carefully. "Next Friday afternoon, I requested time off." Claire's gaze narrowed a fraction. Not anger, calculation. "For my son," Jack added, because leaving it vague felt like hiding. "He has the North Sound STEM Expo." A brief pause rippled through the room. Some people looked down as if they suddenly had urgent notes to read. Someone's foot tapped twice and stopped. Claire's expression stayed smooth. "Personal commitments are personal." Jack felt heat rise in his face. He kept his voice level. "He worked on it for months. He has been counting on me." Claire's eyes flicked very slightly, as if his words had struck something behind them. The movement was gone as soon as it appeared. Rainier's account lead tried a gentle angle. "We could adjust the internal schedule. Mr. Monroe could present earlier in the day, then leave after the client signs off." Claire turned her head to the account lead like she was turning toward an interruption. "We do not build strategy around someone's calendar." The account lead went still. Jack swallowed. "My son is important." Claire's voice did not rise. It did not need to. "So is the client who pays your salary?" Jack felt his jaw clench. He made himself loosen it. If he spoke from that tight place, he would say something he could not take back. Claire looked around the room, eyes moving from face to face. "Meeting adjourned. I want updated concepts on my desk Monday morning. I want a full redesign by Friday." Chairs moved, laptops snapped shut. People stood with practiced speed, carrying their coffee cups like shields. Jack stayed seated for a beat, trying to find the line between dignity and desperation. Claire's gaze returned to him as the room emptied. "Mr. Monroe," she said. Then after a short pause, "Jack, stay." The room cleared until only the two of them remained. The rain on the glass felt louder with no voices to compete. Jack stood and stepped toward the tray. He gathered the empty cups, giving his hands something to do. Claire walked to the end of the table and stopped near him, close enough that he could smell her perfume beneath the clean scent of the building. It was something like cedar and mint, crisp and controlled. She rested her tablet against her hip. "I hired you because you have experience." Jack did not look away. "Experience is not a flaw. I did not say it was." Claire's eyes searched his face, clinical and personal at the same time. but experience can make people cautious. Jack set the last cup on the tray. Caution keeps campaigns from crashing. Claire's mouth held a shape that was not quite a smile, and it also keeps them from flying. Jack took a slow breath. You are asking for something new. I can do that, but I need clarity. What do you want Rainier to feel? Claire's eyes shifted past him to the kitchen window, in his mind to a different kind of rain. Her gaze returned. I want them to feel like stepping outside changes them, she said quietly. It was the first thing she had said that sounded like a person and not a position. Jack held on to that. Okay, he said, that is something. Claire's expression tightened again, as if she had let a door crack open and immediately regretted it. You are not here to be comfortable, she said. You are here to deliver. Jack lifted the tray and carried it to the sideboard. I can deliver. I have delivered for 15 years. And yet your first pass is safe, she replied. Jack turned back to face her. Safe is what you call it when you did not watch someone rebuild their life. Claire's eyes narrowed. Do not make this about your life. It is my life, Jack said, and his voice stayed low, controlled by effort. It is also my son's. Claire stepped closer. The space between them felt charged, not romantic, not yet. More like two wires stripped bare. Then prove you can balance it, she said. Impress me. Give me something Rainier has not seen from any agency in this city. Jack's throat tightened. And my Friday afternoon, Claire held his gaze. Earn it. The words were simple. The meaning was not. Jack saw the structure she lived inside. The belief that everything must be won, never given. That mercy was weakness. That if you loosened your grip, something terrible would slip away. He did not know where she had learned that. He only knew it lived in her like bone. Jack nodded once. Fine. Claire's eyes flicked down into his hands, then back up. Good. Because if you cannot meet the demands of this role, we will revisit whether this is the right place for you. The threat was delivered with the same tone she might use to discuss typography. That was what made it chilling. Jack forced himself to keep his face unreadable. Understood. Claire shifted her weight, as if she might say something else. Her gaze moved to the side of the room, to the empty chairs, the cleared coffee cups, the clean table. For a moment, her eyes looked far away. Then the moment disappeared. You can go, she said. Jack walked out of the conference room, with the coffee tray in his hands. The hallway outside felt brighter than it had a minute ago, and colder. People flowed around him, back to their desks, back to their screens. The building resumed its hum. At his workstation, someone had left him a welcome packet and a new key card. A small plant sat beside his monitor, a peace lily in a plastic pot. The kind of thing offices gave people to make the air feel kind. Jack set the tray down, sank into the chair, and opened his laptop. The company calendar was already populated with deadlines and internal reviews. Friday sat there in the grid like a locked door. Jack clicked on it and stared at the blank space in the afternoon. In his mind, Leo's face appeared again, hopeful and guarded all at once. Jack closed the calendar and opened a new artboard. He stared at the empty white space until his eyes burned. Then he placed his hands on the keyboard and began. The white artboard stared back at Jack like a dare. He started with the words "is not pictures." He wrote down what Claire had said in the conference room, the one sentence that had sounded like it came from somewhere human. Stepping outside changes them. He underlined it. Then he wrote Rainier in the corner and circled it twice. He sketched a boot print. He crossed it out. He sketched a horizon line. He crossed that out too. His screen filled with failures fast. That was the only way he knew to get to anything good. By noon, he had 12 thumbnails and a headache. By 3, he had a Slack message from Tessa, the account lead. Claire wants to see progress today. Jack stared at the message until the words blurred. He typed back a single line. On it. He was not. He walked down the hall to the small print room and ran mock-ups on thick paper that smelled like fresh ink and heat. The printer whirred, then spat out pages like it was clearing its throat. Jack laid them across a table and stepped back. He looked for the thing that made a concept breathe. He looked for the angle that would make Rainier feel like an invitation instead of a catalog. He found competence. He found control. He found safe. At 4:30, he carried the pages to Claire's office. Her door was closed. The glass walls were clear enough to see the silhouette inside. She stood at her desk, head bent toward her screen, shoulders still. Her posture did not change when Jack knocked. The door swung inward a beat later, controlled as if it had been waiting for the right moment to open. Claire's eyes went to the paper in his hands. Show me. Jack laid the mock-ups on the edge of her desk, smoothing the corners like he could flatten his nerves into them. Claire leaned forward, scanned, then tapped a finger on the page twice. You moved the needle, she said. Relief tried to rise. Jack held it down. Claire turned to the next page. And then you stopped. Jack kept his voice steady. The story is there. It just needs refinement. Claire's gaze lifted. It needs risk. Jack swallowed. Risk can be irresponsible. Claire's face remained calm. Risk is why people hire us. She pushed the pages back toward him. Not rude, not gentle. Final. Try again. Jack gathered the mock-ups, his fingers careful. Monday morning, he said. You said you wanted them Monday morning. Claire did not blink. And now I want better. Jack held her gaze a second too long. He could feel himself nearing the edge of something sharp. Anything else, he asked? Claire's eyes flicked to his left hand, the ring finger that no longer wore a ring, but still felt its absence some days. Then her eyes returned to his face, as if she had not looked anywhere at all. Close the door on your way out, she said. Jack left her office with the paper pressed to his chest. The hallway lights hummed. Somewhere down the row of desks, a designer laughed softly at something on screen, then lowered the volume. When a manager passed, Jack returned to his station and opened a new file. He stayed until after 8, then 9, then 10. The building thinned out around him. Desks went dark one by one. The rain kept tapping the windows, patient as always. Jack's stomach growled. He ignored it and kept dragging type across images, resizing, shifting, trying to make the work feel like it had a pulse. At 10:47, his phone buzzed. Rosa. He stepped into the stairwell to take the call. The concrete walls held the smell of damp coats and old paint. Jack, Rosa said, her voice low. She never sounded alarmed unless there was a reason. Leo ate dinner. He did his homework. He is in his room. Okay, Jack said. Thank you. A pause. He could hear the faint sound of a television in the background at Rosa's house. A commercial jingle. A door closing. He asked if you are coming Friday, she said. Jack closed his eyes. Tell him yes, Jack said. Rosa's silence had weight. I did. He said okay. Jack heard the word the way Leo said it now. A door shut gently. I will be home soon, Jack said. You say that too, Rosa replied. Not cruel, just true. Jack swallowed. How is he? He is quiet, Rosa said. Not angry. That would be easier. He is quiet like he is holding something so it does not spill. Jack leaned his forehead against the cool concrete wall. I am trying. I know, Rosa said. Trying is not the same as being there. Jack did not answer because anything he said would sound like an excuse. Rosa lowered her voice. His inhaler is getting light. He told me it makes a different sound when it is near empty. Jack's throat tightened. I will refill it tomorrow. Good, Rosa said. Do not wait. After he hung up, Jack stayed in the stairwell for a moment, staring at the emergency exit sign. The red letters glowed like a warning. He wanted to press his face into his hands. He did not. He wiped his palms on his jeans and went back to his desk. He left the building just before midnight. Seattle's air was cold enough to taste. Rain slid down the sides of cars and pooled along the curb. Jack's shoulders ached as he drove home, hands at 10 and 2, jaw tight. Streetlights smeared into soft halos across the windshield. Rosa's porch light was still on when he pulled into his driveway. His own house sat dark except for a small lamp in the living room that Rosa always left on. It made the windows glow a warm amber like someone inside was keeping watch. Jack unlocked the door and stepped into the quiet. Leo's backpack sat by the bench where it always landed. His sneakers were lined up neatly, toes forward, as if order could compensate for absence. Jack set his keys down without making noise and listened. No coughing, no movement, just the refrigerator hum and the rain on the roof. He walked to Leo's room and paused at the door. He did not go in. He looked at his son's silhouette under the blanket, one knee raised like a small mountain. Leo's hair stuck up at the crown the way it always did when he fell asleep too fast. Jack backed away and closed the door softly. In the kitchen, he found a plate under foil on the counter. Rice chicken, a small pile of sliced oranges. Rosa's handwriting on a sticky note. He ate. He did not taste much. At the table, Leo's science project materials were spread out in neat piles. Cardboard glue sticks, small LED lights, a sheet of foil, a ruler with pencil marks along the edge, a printed map of the neighborhood with tiny circles drawn where trees should go. Jack reached out and touched the cardboard lightly, like it might bruise. He opened his laptop. The screen lit the room in pale blue. Jack worked until his eyes burned. He watched the clock slide past 1:30, then 2. He adjusted a headline by 2 pixels, then again. He built a new layout, tore it down, rebuilt it with a different rhythm. At 2:18, his phone buzzed. An email. From Claire. Subject Rainier. One line inside. Better. Push further. Jack stared at the sentence. No greeting, no sign off. It could have been written by a machine. And yet it was sent at 2:18 in the morning. He pictured Claire alone in her office, the glass walls, the city beyond the rain. He pictured her face lit by a screen, eyes unblinking. He tried to imagine what it would take to stay that sharp, that late without anyone waiting at home. He shut the thought down and kept working. At 3:41, his shoulders locked up. He stood and stretched, feeling his spine crack. He poured himself a glass of water and leaned against the counter while it slid down his throat. He did not make coffee. Hazelnut or not, he could already feel his hands vibrating. He returned to the table and found a new sticky note on his laptop. Friday. The letters were blocky, pressed hard. Leo's handwriting. Jack stared at it until his eyes stung. He pressed the note flat with his palm like he could absorb it into his skin. He went to Leo's room again. Leo was awake, not fully sitting up, just turned toward the door, eyes open in the glow of the nightlight. His face looked smaller at night, younger. Jack's chest tightened. "Hey," he whispered. Leo's voice was soft. "You are home." "Yeah," Jack said. He stepped closer and sat on the edge of the bed, careful not to shake it. "I am sorry I'm late." Leo shrugged under the blanket. It was a small movement, but it carried distance. "It is fine." "It is not," Jack said, and then he stopped himself. He did not want to turn this into an argument in the dark. Leo's eyes shifted past Jack to the doorway to the hall. "Rosa said you were working." Jack nodded. "I was." Leo's breathing sounded normal. Jack listened anyway, like his ears could protect his son. "Are you going to miss Friday?" Leo asked. Jack felt the question land in his body, not in his head, in his ribs, in his stomach, in the place where fear lived. "No," Jack said. "I am not." Leo held his gaze. "Okay." Jack wanted to shake the okay out of him and replace it with trust, with certainty. He reached out and brushed Leo's hair back from his forehead instead, the way Nora used to do when Leo had nightmares. Leo's eyes fluttered. "Dad?" "Yeah." Leo's voice went quieter. "Is your boss always like that?" Jack hesitated. Honesty mattered. So did not poisoning his kid's view of the world. "She is," Jack said carefully, very focused. Leo's mouth twisted, focused on what making people tired. Jack let out a breath that almost turned into a laugh, then died in his throat. Leo kept going like he had been saving this. "She must be lonely," he said, "if she makes other people stay away from their families." Jack stared at his son. The words were simple, a kid's logic, but they slid under Jack's anger and touched something underneath it, something he had not wanted to see. He thought of Claire's stillness in the conference room, the way the room obeyed her, the way her eyes had flickered just once when he said, "My son." Jack swallowed. "Go to sleep," he whispered. Leo's eyelids drifted shut. "Do not forget Friday," he murmured, already fading. "I will not," Barak said, though he was not sure who he was trying to convince. He left Leo's room and stood in the hallway for a long moment listening to the house. Rain ticked on the roof. The refrigerator hummed. The clock in the living room kept time with stubborn patience. Jack went back to the kitchen table and looked at his screen. The artboard was still empty in the places that mattered. The pressure sat on his shoulders like a hand. He placed Leo's sticky note beside the trackpad where he could not ignore it. Then he started moving shapes again, trying to find a story that could hold everything without breaking. Jack kept moving shapes until the screen stopped looking like a problem and started looking like a place. He worked in small, stubborn steps. A headline slid left. An image breathed. A block of copy found its rhythm. The rain never stopped. It softened the house around him like the world was wrapped in wet cotton. When he finally closed his laptop, the clock read 4:12. He lay down fully dressed on top of the covers, his eyes shut. His mind did not. An hour later, a soft knock came from the hallway. Leo stood there, backpack on, hair damp from a rushed shower. "You forgot to wake me," Leo said. Jack sat up too fast and his head spun. "I am sorry." Leo looked at the kitchen table, at the laptop, at the sticky note that still said Friday. He did not comment. He only moved toward the cereal like he had learned to feed himself around his father's deadlines. Rosa arrived at 8, with a fresh umbrella and a look that said she had already counted the circles under Jack's eyes. "You look like a ghost," she said, and then she shoved a paper bag into his hands. "Eat." Inside was a breakfast burrito wrapped in foil. It was warm. It smelled like eggs and salsa and something steady. Jack took a bite standing by the sink. He chewed like his jaw had forgotten how. Leo watched him. "Are you going to be home for dinner?" Jack wanted to say yes the way he had said yes to Friday. He swallowed and chose the truth he could actually hold. "I will try." Leo's mouth tightened. He nodded once, then turned away to zip his backpack. The zipper sounded loud in the small kitchen. Jack drove to Sterling and Comey while the sky was still gray. The streets shone with rain. A bus sighed at a stoplight, releasing a flock of people in hoods and headphones. His windshield wipers kept time. He listened to the rhythm and tried to make his breathing match it. The lobby was almost empty when he walked in. The neon Sterling sign glowed above reception like a quiet dare. His badge beeped at the turnstile. Green light, permission granted. On the creative floor, most desks were dark. A cleaning crew moved silently along the windows, leaving clear streaks on glass that would be speckled again by noon. Jack headed toward his workstation and stopped. Claire's office light was on. He had never seen it on this early. He approached the glass walls slowly, not wanting to startle the moment. Claire stood with her back to the door, staring out at the city. Her shoulders were slightly rounded, the first imperfection Jack had ever noticed in her posture. One hand rested on the window ledge, fingers splayed as if she needed the contact to stay upright. Rain streamed down the glass. It bent the buildings into soft shapes. Claire did not move. Jack hesitated, then knocked lightly on the doorframe. Claire turned. For a fraction of a second, her face was unguarded. There was redness around her eyes, and the skin beneath them looked tender, like she had scrubbed at it. She blinked once, and the Claire Sterling Jack knew snapped back into place. "Mr. Monroe," she said, voice crisp. Then, as if correcting herself, "Jack, you are early." "So are you," Jack replied. Claire stepped back toward her desk tablet already in hand. "I am reviewing the Cascade account." Jack nodded like he knew what that meant, like he belonged in the language of accounts and pressure. He did not yet. What he knew was the look he had just seen in her eyes. He held up a cup. "I brought you coffee." Claire's gaze flicked to the cup. The lid was marked with a quick scribble from the cafe downstairs. Hazelnut. He had bought it without thinking, the way he bought hazelnut creamer at the grocery store, because Leo liked it, because the smell made the kitchen feel less sharp in the morning. He remembered, too, that Claire's assistant had once asked if anyone wanted coffee, and Claire, without looking up, had said hazelnut. No sugar. It had been an aside, a detail no one cared about. Claire stared at the cup as if it were evidence. "You remembered that," she said. Jack set it on the edge of her desk. "I pay attention." For a moment, the only sound was the rain and the low hum of the building. Claire's throat moved as she swallowed something unsaid. Her fingers hovered near the cup, not touching it yet. "You should be working," she said, but her voice had lost some of its blade. "I am," Jack replied. "This is part of it." Claire's eyes lifted to his. Ice blue, sharp and tired. He held the gaze. He did not flinch. He let her see that he had seen her. A phone rang on her desk, sudden and shrill in the quiet. Claire's hand snapped to the receiver like it was a lifeline. "Yes," she said. "Already business?" "No. That is not acceptable. I do not care if their legal team is slow. Make it fast." Jack took a step back, giving her space. She covered the mouthpiece and looked at him. "Send me updated directions by noon," she said. Jack nodded. "I will." Claire's eyes flicked to the coffee again. Her hand closed around the cup just once, a small claim on warmth. "Jack," she said, and the sound of his name was different this time. Less like a label, more like a person. He paused. "Thank you," she said quickly, like the word was unfamiliar on her tongue. Jack did not smile too big. He did not make a joke. He only nodded once and left her office, carrying the moment with him like a fragile thing. At his desk, he opened his files and worked with a new kind of focus. He built a story around motion and breath. He found images that felt like cold air in lungs, like boots hitting wet earth, like a path that did not ask permission. He kept hearing Claire's phrase in his head, "Stepping outside changes them," and he began to realize she had been asking for transformation, not decoration. He sent 3 revised directions at 11:47. At 12:10, Claire's feedback arrived in his inbox. Less like an order, more like a scalpel. Direction 2 is close. The opening line is strong. The layout still feels polite. Make it bolder. Jack stared at the sentence. He read it twice. He felt the strange rush of being seen by someone who never wasted words. He wrote back a simple reply. Understood. By late afternoon, Claire summoned him again. This time, she did not keep him standing at the door. She motioned him to the chair across from her desk and slid his prints between them. "These," she said, tapping the page, "are better." Jack waited. The other shoe always dropped. Claire's finger moved to a headline he had written, a short line about leaving the safe path. She paused. "Where did you get that?" she asked. Jack kept his voice neutral. "From you." Claire looked up sharply. "You said you wanted people to feel changed," Jack continued. "I wrote toward that." Her gaze held on him. Something worked behind it fast, like gears catching. "I do not want your work to sound like a quote from me," she said. "It does not," Jack replied. "It sounds like what you asked for." Claire's jaw tightened. Her eyes flicked away for a breath, then returned. "Rainier does not pay for what I ask for," she said. They pay for what you deliver. Jack nodded. Then let me deliver it. Claire studied him a moment longer. The room smelled faintly of hazelnut now. Jack could see the cup on her desk half empty. All right, she said. Push direction 2. Bring it back. Jack rose. As he reached the door, Claire spoke again. Your son, she said. Jack turned. His stomach tightened. What about him? Jack asked carefully. Claire's eyes dropped to the papers, then lifted again. You said he has an expo, she said. Her voice was even, but the question beneath it was not. How old is he? Jack blinked. It was the first time she had asked anything that did not serve a deadline. 13, Jack said. He builds little cities out of cardboard. He takes it seriously. Claire's gaze softened so slightly, Jack wondered if he imagined it. 13, she repeated as if tasting the number. Jack waited for her to say more. She did not. Her eyes went back to the screen. You can go, she said, and it sounded like she was dismissing both of them from something neither had named. Jack walked out into the open floor, where people typed and whispered, and pretended not to notice anything that happened inside glass offices. He returned to his desk and worked until the sky outside the windows turned black. At home, he found Leo at the dining table, hands sticky with glue head bent over his model. Tiny streetlights made from LEDs blinked along a cardboard boulevard. The sight hit Jack in the chest. Hey, Jack said softly. Leo glanced up. You are home. Jack set his bag down and moved closer, taking in the small details. A row of trees made from green pipe cleaners. A river cut from blue construction paper. A tiny sign that read Park in careful block letters. This is incredible, Jack said. Leo shrugged, but the corner of his mouth lifted. It is not finished. Jack pulled a chair close and sat. His shoulders ached. His eyes burned. He did not open his laptop. What is this part? He asked, pointing to a section of the model where Leo had placed little foil squares on rooftops. Solar, Leo said, proud despite himself. It powers the lights so the city uses less energy. Jack nodded. Smart. Leo's eyes narrowed. You are really looking. Jack forced himself to stay present. I am? For a few minutes they worked together in silence. Jack held pieces steady while Leo taped them down. Glue strings stretched and snapped. The house smelled like cardboard and hazelnut creamer, like the small life they kept trying to rebuild. Then Leo said, without looking up, Friday is still Friday. Jack's throat tightened. Yes. Leo pressed a piece of tape down hard. Okay, he said, and the word carried the same careful distance Rosa had described. Jack reached across the table and covered Leo's hand with his own. Leo's fingers were warm. Jack's were cold. I will be there, Jack said quietly enough that it felt like a promise meant for the room itself. Leo did not pull away. He did not lean in either. He only nodded once and returned to his work. After Leo went to bed, Jack washed glue off his hands and stood at the sink staring out at the rain. The porch light made the droplets shine. He thought of Claire at her window that morning, shoulders rounded, eyes, red hand pressed to glass. He made coffee and added hazelnut creamer. The smell rose sweet and familiar. It made his chest loosen just a fraction. At the table, he opened his laptop and pushed direction 2 until the layout stopped being polite. He stripped away extra lines. He let negative space speak. He chose images that felt like cold air and wet trail and the moment just before a laugh. Near midnight, a new email arrived from Claire. 1 sentence. This is closer. Do not soften it. Jack read it twice. He felt the pressure in it, yes. He also felt something else. A kind of fierce attention. A demand, but not a careless one. He set his phone face down and kept working the rain tapping the window, like fingers asking to be let in. The rain kept its steady tapping patient as a metronome. Jack worked until the numbers on the clock stopped feeling real. When he finally shut the laptop, the room was so quiet he could hear the refrigerator shift and settle. He rinsed his mug and set it upside down on the towel. The hazelnut smell clung to the air, sweet and almost mocking. He stood in the dark kitchen a moment longer than he needed to, listening to the house. Leo's breathing down the hall, Rosa's earlier warning in his head, the memory of Claire's red eyes behind glass. Jack went to bed with his phone on the nightstand, and his mind still running. He must have fallen asleep because the next thing he knew was sound cutting through him. Not the gentle buzz of an alarm, not Rosa knocking, a sharp ring that did not belong to his life. His eyes opened to darkness. The clock glowed 8:26. The phone screen lit up with the school's number. Jack's hand closed around the phone too fast. Hello? A woman's voice, professional and tight. Mr. Monroe, this is Ms. Delgado, vice principal at Westlake Middle. Jack sat up. His sheets tangled around his legs. Is Leo okay? There was a pause that lasted too long. He collapsed during gym, she said. We called an ambulance. They are taking him to Harborview. Jack swung his feet to the floor. His heart slammed against his ribs. Collapsed how? He couldn't catch his breath, Ms. Delgado said. He had his inhaler, but it wasn't enough. Jack's throat went dry. He grabbed his jeans off the chair and shoved his legs into them. I'm coming. He did not remember ending the call. He did not remember locking the door. He remembered the cold air outside and the way the rain hit his face like a slap. He remembered his hands shaking so badly he dropped his keys once, then found them by feel on the wet porch boards. The drive to Harborview was a smear of red lights and slick asphalt. His wipers beat hard. He ran a stop sign. He slowed only when a bus lurched through the intersection, big and indifferent. His mouth tasted like metal. He kept one hand on the wheel and the other on the seat beside him, as if he could keep Leo there by force. In the emergency entrance, the air smelled of disinfectant and damp clothing. People moved in fast, practiced lines. A security guard pointed him to the desk. Jack said his name like it was all he had. A nurse asked him to sign a form. Jack's hand shook as he wrote Monroe. The letters looked wrong, jagged, like he had forgotten how to hold a pen. Your son is being evaluated, the nurse said. Take a seat. The waiting room chairs were molded plastic. The television on the wall played a daytime talk show with the volume low. The host's smile looked obscene in this light. Jack sat and immediately stood again. He paced to the window and back. He watched a family across the room whisper into each other's shoulders. He watched an older man stare at his hands. Every few minutes he checked his phone, then hated himself for it, as if looking away for a second might change the outcome. A door opened. A doctor stepped out, mask hanging loose around his neck. Mr. Monroe. Jack moved toward him too fast. That's me. Where is he? The doctor's face was calm in the way doctors learn to be. He's stable. Jack's knees almost gave out. He caught himself on the edge of a chair. Can I see him? In a moment, the doctor said, we're finishing up his breathing treatment. It appears to be an asthma exacerbation. Attack, Jack said. The word felt more honest. Yes, the doctor replied. Stress can be a factor, so can sleep and routine and exposure. Jack nodded like he understood, but he couldn't feel anything below his chest. The doctor's eyes flicked over Jack, taking in the soaked hair, the unshaved jaw, the way Jack could not keep his hands still. Has he been under unusual pressure? Jack thought of the STEM Expo, the model city. The sticky note that said Friday. Leo's careful, okay? Jack swallowed. Yes. The doctor's voice softened a fraction. We've given him medication to open his airways. He's responding well. He'll need rest and consistent management. Jack heard the subtext the way he heard everything now, too loud. Be there. Do not keep asking his body to hold what he is holding. A nurse waved them through. Jack followed, shoes squeaking on the linoleum. The hall smelled like bleach and stale coffee. Somewhere a machine beeped in a steady rhythm. Leo lay on a bed with white sheets pulled up to his waist. A clear tube ran under his nose. His skin looked pale against the pillow. His eyes were open but heavy. The second Leo saw Jack, his mouth moved in a small shape that was almost a smile. Jack crossed the room and sat hard in the chair beside the bed. He reached for Leo's hand and felt the warmth, the pulse, the life. His chest tightened so much it hurt. Hey, Jack whispered. Leo blinked slowly. Hi. Jack swallowed again. He wanted to say 1,000 things. He said the only one that mattered. I'm here. Leo's fingers curled weakly around Jack's. I couldn't breathe, he said, and his voice was thin. Jack's eyes burned. I know. Leo looked up at the ceiling, then back to Jack. It was like my chest was too small. Jack squeezed his hand careful. You're okay now. Leo's gaze drifted to Jack's face. His eyes were clear and tired. You look tired, he said. Jack almost laughed, then almost cried. You should see the other guy. Leo's lips twitched. It cost him effort. A nurse came in with a clipboard and checked the monitor, adjusted the oxygen, asked Leo a few questions. Leo answered obediently. When she left the room, fell back into quiet, except for the soft hiss of the oxygen. Jack stayed holding Leo's hand until Leo's eyelids drooped. When Leo finally drifted into a light sleep, Jack let his own shoulders sag for the first time all day. He sat back in the chair and stared at the wall. His phone buzzed. A notification from work, his inbox, then another, a Slack ping. Jack's stomach twisted. The building was still there waiting. The artboard was still blank in the places that mattered. The deadline did not know his son was lying here with a tube under his nose. Jack pulled his laptop from his bag with slow hands like he was doing something shameful. He opened it on his knees. The screen's blue light painted his knuckles. He worked in short bursts, stopping every few minutes to look at Leo, to listen to his breathing, to count the steady rise and fall of his chest. The irony was cruel. A campaign about breath and wild air, and the way stepping outside changes you while his son slept under hospital air. Jack rubbed his eyes. The words on the screen doubled. He blinked them back into focus. Time slid. A nurse came in to check Leo's vitals. A different nurse brought water. The doctor returned briefly and said Leo was continuing to improve. Jack nodded, thanked him, then went back to the laptop like it was the only thing keeping him upright. At some point, Jack stood and walked to the vending machines at the end of the hall. He stared at the rows of chips and candy bars and pressed buttons without thinking. A granola bar dropped with a thud. He ate it without tasting it. He returned to the room and sat down again. Leo stirred and opened his eyes. "Dad," he murmured. Jack leaned in. "Yeah." Leo's voice was rough. "Did I mess up your work?" Jack felt his throat tighten again. "No." Leo's brow creased. "You're always working." Jack wanted to lie. He wanted to say, "Not anymore." He did not trust himself with that kind of promise in this room. He chose something else. Right now he said, "I'm here." Leo watched him. "Okay," he whispered, and this time the words sounded like surrender. Leo fell asleep again. Jack stared at the laptop screen and felt something crack inside him. Not loud, not dramatic, just a quiet shift. The edges of his anger at Claire, the edges of his fear about money and job security, the edges of his pride, they all rubbed against each other and made heat. At 6:58 a.m., Jack's phone rang. The name on the screen made his stomach drop all over again. Claire Sterling. For a second, he considered letting it go to voicemail. Then he pictured her face controlled and precise, and the thought of her leaving a message that would be recorded forever on his phone made him answer. "Hello?" Her voice came through clear, not rushed. "You are not in the office." Jack stared at Leo's sleeping face. "No." There was a pause. "Where are you?" Jack kept his voice low. "Harborview." Leo had an asthma attack at school. Silence filled the line. Jack could hear something on her end faint like the hum of an office. Then her voice returned quieter. "Is he all right?" The question landed strange. Not from her mouth. Not after weeks of clipped demands. Jack blinked. "He's stable," Jack said. "They're keeping him for observation." Another pause. The kind where words are chosen carefully. "Work from home today," Claire said finally. "If you can. If you cannot, then do not." Jack exhaled slowly. "Thank you." Claire's voice tightened again, returning to familiar ground. "I still need the Rainier redesign by Friday." Jack felt the pressure rise in his chest. His eyes went to Leo, to the tube under his nose, to the small hand resting on the sheet. "I know," Jack said. Claire did not speak for a beat. When she did, her tone shifted almost imperceptibly, but Jack heard it. "Tell him," she said. "Tell Leo I hope he feels better." Jack stared at the phone as if it had spoken on its own. "Okay," he managed. "Good," Claire said, and there was something in that word that did not sound like an order. "Keep me updated." The call ended. Jack stayed still with the phone in his hand, listening to the steady hiss of oxygen. Outside the hospital window, the sky was a dull gray. The city looked washed out, as if the rain had erased its sharper edges. He set the phone down and leaned forward until his forehead rested briefly against the bed rail. Leo's breathing stayed even. Jack listened to it counting, letting each inhale and exhale anchor him for another moment. By afternoon, the hospital room had warmed with small signs of normal. Leo's color came back in his cheeks. The oxygen tube was gone. A plastic cup of ice chips sat melted on the tray table. He looked smaller without the equipment, like the whole ordeal had been too big for his body. The doctor returned with a calm voice and a stack of papers. "He can go home today," he said. "No gym for a week. Follow the action plan. Keep the rescue inhaler with him. Refill it today." Jack signed forms with steadier hands than the day before, but his chest stayed tight. He listened to instructions like they were a new language he had to learn before sundown. Leo sat on the edge of the bed, swinging his legs slowly, while Jack helped him into his hoodie. The hood stuck to Leo's damp hair. Leo's movements were careful, like he was testing the world for sharp edges. "You good?" Jack asked. Leo nodded once, tired. "Me too," Jack said, and tried to make it sound like a joke. They left Harborview under a slate sky. Rain misted the sidewalks. Jack guided Leo through the sliding doors and toward the car, hand hovering near Leo's back without touching, ready to catch him if he swayed. In the passenger seat, Leo leaned his head against the window and watched the city blur. Jack drove with both hands on the wheel, eyes flicking between the road and Leo's reflection in the glass. Every time Leo shifted, Jack's stomach tightened. At the pharmacy, the line moved with the slow patience of people who had already waited too long. Jack held the prescription bag like it was fragile. Leo sat on a plastic chair near the photo kiosk, shoulders curled in sweatshirt sleeves pulled over his hands. A couple argued quietly at the counter. A toddler cried in bursts. Somewhere behind Jack, a man coughed hard into his elbow. The sound made Jack's heart jump. When the pharmacist finally called his name, Jack paid too much attention to every syllable of the instructions. He repeated them back until the pharmacist nodded. Only then did Jack tuck the inhaler into Leo's backpack and zip it up himself. Back home, Rosa was waiting on the porch umbrella tucked under her arm. She took one look at Leo and opened her arms. Leo stepped into the hug without hesitation, pressing his forehead into her shoulder. "My little lion," Rosa murmured. She pulled back and cupped his face. "You scared your father half to death." Leo blinked. "I scared myself." Rosa's gaze flicked to Jack. It was not blame. It was a question with teeth. Jack nodded once. He did not have words that would satisfy her. Inside, the house smelled like lemon cleaner and warm tortillas. Rosa had cooked. A pot simmered on the stove. The living room lamp was on the same warm amber light that made the house feel like someone was always waiting. Leo moved slowly to the couch and sat down, pulling a blanket over his legs. He looked at the dining table where his model city waited half-finished. His eyes held on it for a moment, then drifted away. Jack set his bag down and crouched in front of Leo. "How do you feel?" Leo shrugged. "Like I ran a mile." Jack reached for Leo's wrist and checked his pulse the way he had watched nurses do. Leo's skin was warm. His pulse was steady. Jack exhaled. Rosa stood behind Jack at the edge of the kitchen, arms crossed. Her expression was soft, but her posture was not. "Sit," she said to Jack. Jack shook his head. "I need to check something." Rosa's brows lifted. "You need to eat." Jack looked at Leo, then at the dining table, then at the laptop bag by the door, like it was a weight he had been dragging for miles. He sat. Rosa served plates without asking. Food appeared in front of him and Leo. Chicken, rice, beans, slices of avocado. It smelled like home in a way Sterling and Comey never could. Leo ate slowly. Jack ate faster than his stomach wanted because chewing gave him something to do besides think. When the plates were half empty, Rosa spoke without raising her voice. "He has to rest." Jack nodded. "I know." Rosa's gaze stayed on Jack. "And you?" Jack's mouth tightened. "There is a deadline." Rosa leaned on the counter. "A deadline does not sit at your table." Leo's fork paused. He did not look up, but Jack could feel him listening. Jack kept his voice low. "This job pays our bills." Rosa's eyes narrowed. "Your son needs you to be alive in his life, not just in the house." Jack swallowed. "I'm trying." Rosa did not argue. She only reached across the table and touched Leo's hand lightly. "You rest," she said to him. "I will come by after school tomorrow, and you will not lift a finger until you can breathe without thinking about it." Leo nodded, small and grateful. After dinner, Leo shuffled to his room and changed into pajamas. Jack followed and helped him set up pillows so he could sleep propped up. The doctor had said it would help. Leo climbed into bed and pulled the blanket to his chin. His eyelids were heavy, but he stayed awake watching Jack. Jack sat on the edge of the bed. He kept his voice gentle. "I'm going to work at the table for a bit." Leo's brow creased. "Now, just a little," Jack said. "I'll be right here." Leo stared at him. "You always say that." Jack felt the words hit a tender spot. "I know." Leo's gaze shifted to the nightstand, to the inhaler now standing upright like a bright blue sentinel. "I don't want to go back there," he whispered. Jack's throat tightened. "You won't." Leo's voice was thin. "I couldn't breathe, Dad." Jack reached out and covered Leo's hand. Leo's fingers were cool. Jack held on like he was anchoring them both. "I'm here," Jack said. Leo searched his face. "Friday," Leo said quietly. Jack nodded. "Friday." Leo's eyes blinked slow. "Okay." Jack stayed until Leo's breathing deepened and evened out. Then he stood and walked back down the hall, each step careful as if he might wake something breakable. The kitchen table waited. Leo's model city sat in the center streets, drawn in pencil and ruler lines. A little sign that read "Park" leaned against a cardboard building. LED lights rested in a pile like tiny stars that had not found their places yet. Jack set his laptop on the table beside the model and opened it. The screen flared to life, stark and demanding. He pulled up the Rainier files. Layouts, typography, image grids, copy lines. All of it felt both close and far, like something he had made in a different life. He worked in short bursts, then stopped. He listened for Leo's breathing down the hall. He glanced at the model city. He clicked back to the layout. He nudged an image. He rewrote a line. He stared at it until it lost meaning. His phone buzzed once with a message from Claire. Status. One word, no punctuation. Jack stared at it until his eyes burned, then typed back. Working. Leo is home. He watched the typing bubble appear and vanish, then nothing. The hours slid. The rain kept tapping the window. Rosa washed dishes quietly, then left without fanfare. She squeezed Jack's shoulder as she passed. "Sleep," she whispered. Jack nodded, but his hands did not stop. Wednesday blurred into Thursday with only a few hours of uneven rest in between. Jack took calls from the school arranged for Leo to stay home, sent emails to Rainier's account team, revised headlines, rebuilt layouts, searched for images that felt like cold air and wet trail, and a body that could inhale without fear. Each time he checked on Leo, he found his son at the dining table working slowly on the model city. Leo's face was pale but focused. He measured cut taped. He did not complain. That made Jack feel worse. Thursday evening, the house smelled like glue and chicken soup. Leo had assembled the final piece, a tiny bridge over his paper river. He held it up with both hands and smiled just a little, like he was giving himself permission. "Look," Leo said. Jack leaned in. The bridge was made from popsicle sticks and dental floss tensioned tight so it held. It was simple and smart. "That's incredible," Jack said. Leo's eyes lit for a second. "It's strong," he said. "It doesn't look like much, but it holds." Jack swallowed. Leo placed the bridge into the city with careful fingers. He stepped back and looked at the whole project. "Do you think it's good enough?" Jack stood and came around the table. He wrapped his arms around Leo, pulling him in close. Leo smelled like soap and cardboard. Jack pressed his cheek to Leo's hair. "It's brilliant," Jack said. "You're brilliant." Leo hugged him back for a moment, then pulled away embarrassed by his own need. "Okay," he said, but the word was warmer this time. Leo carried the model into the living room and set it on a piece of plywood that would make it easier to transport. He arranged the label card, smoothing it with his palm like it mattered. Then he yawned hard and looked up at Jack. "Are you coming?" Jack's chest tightened. "Yes." Leo stared at him, measuring. "Like really coming?" Jack held his gaze. "Really?" Leo nodded slowly and went to bed. When Leo's door clicked shut, the house fell into a silence that felt staged. Jack stood in the kitchen and looked at two worlds sharing one table. Leo's model city on the plywood in the living room, a fragile proof of effort and hope. Jack's laptop in front of him, a grid of images and words that needed to impress a client and a woman who did not accept almost. He sat down and opened the latest version of the Rainier deck. It was good, it was clean, it was bold enough to stand out. It was also missing the last 5% Claire always hunted, the piece that made a campaign feel inevitable. Jack's hands hovered over the keyboard. He tried to force inspiration. He tried to remember how it felt to have energy. He tried to imagine Claire's eyes scanning the pages, searching for weakness. His phone buzzed again. Another message from Claire. "Send what you have." Jack stared at the words. He could stay up all night, chase perfection, show up to the expo, half alive, smiling through exhaustion, until Leo noticed, until Leo learned that promises came with an invisible asterisk. Or he could choose one thing and accept the cost. Jack's throat tightened. He closed his eyes and saw Leo on the hospital bed, saw the clear tube, saw Leo's lips forming the words, "I couldn't breathe." Jack opened his eyes. He gathered the files into a single deck. He polished what could be polished quickly. He fixed the small alignment issues, tightened the copy, checked the color values twice. Then he stopped. He wrote an email. "Claire, attached are the completed Rainier concepts. They are strong, professional, and ready to present. Tomorrow afternoon, I will be at my son's North Sound STEM Expo. If that means I no longer have a place at Sterling & Co., I understand." Jack. He read it 3 times. He did not add a smiley face. He did not soften the edges. He did not explain Leo's hospital stay again, as if it could earn mercy. His finger hovered over send. His pulse pounded in his ears. Then he clicked. The email disappeared. The screen went still. Jack sat there for a long moment, hands resting on the table, listening to the rain. His body felt hollow, like he had poured something out that he could not get back. He closed the laptop with a quiet click. He stood and walked to Leo's door. He opened it just enough to look in. Leo slept on his side, one hand curled near his face. The inhaler stood on the nightstand. The rise and fall of Leo's chest was steady. Jack's eyes burned. He blinked hard until the sting eased. He shut the door softly and went to his room. He changed into a clean shirt and lay down. The sheets were cool. The darkness pressed in. Jack stared at the ceiling, waiting for his phone to ring, waiting for an email to land like a hammer. Nothing came. He closed his eyes and let himself sink, exhausted and frightened, holding one clear thought, the way you hold onto a rail in rough water. Friday. Jack must have drifted off because the next sound came from far away at first. A dull crack, then a scatter of smaller clicks across wood. Rain kept tapping the roof steady and bored, like it had been there all along. The doorbell chimed. Jack sat up in the dark, throat tight. For a second he thought it was his phone, and the office had finally decided to cut him loose. Then the bell rang again, softer this time, like the finger had slipped. He stumbled down the hall with one sock on palm, brushing the wall to find his balance. Leo's door was cracked open. The nightlight painted a thin stripe of amber across the carpet. Jack paused long enough to listen for breathing. Steady, quiet. He moved to the front door and pulled it open to a rush of cold air and wet cedar. Claire Sterling stood on his porch, soaked through hair plastered to her cheeks. A white ceramic planter lay shattered at her feet, soil smeared across the boards. She flinched as thunder rolled. I did not mean to. Jack did not step aside at first. He felt the chill seep into his bare foot. "Do you know what time it is? I need to come in," she said, and her voice sounded like it had been scraped thin. "After tonight, you will not look at me the same way." He should have shut the door. He should have protected the quiet. Instead, he moved back and let her cross the threshold. Now she stood in his kitchen, under the soft pool of light from the lamp above the sink, clutching a towel against her wet hair. Water dotted the hardwood. Her coat dripped onto the mat. The house smelled of dish soap and rain and hazelnut creamer, a faint sweetness that did not belong with the tension in the room. Jack leaned against the counter, arms crossed, keeping his voice low. "Talk, and keep it down. My son is asleep." Claire nodded once. Her gaze flicked toward the hallway, as if she could see through walls. Then it returned to him. Her eyes were ice blue, but the sharpness was gone. What replaced it looked like fear. "I read your email," she said. Jack did not answer. He could feel the words still on his tongue from last night, the way he had typed them with a steady hand that did not match his pulse. Claire swallowed. "When I saw you choose your son, I felt something I have not felt in years." Jack's jaw tightened. "And that made you drive here in the rain." "It made me realize I was about to become the exact kind of person I hate," she said. The sentence came out fast, like she was afraid to lose nerve. "I already am that person most days." Jack held her gaze. "You are my boss. That is all I know." Claire's fingers tightened around the towel. Her knuckles went white. "No." The word was quiet, but it carried weight. Claire looked down at the kitchen table, at the scratched wood, at the stack of mail near the fruit bowl, at Leo's science notebook tucked under a corner of cardboard. Evidence of a life lived in pieces. Then she lifted her eyes again and said, "My father worked for someone like me." Jack stayed still. He felt the room narrow, like the walls had leaned in. Claire's voice went softer. "His name was Peter Sterling. He was a designer, not the kind who chased awards, the kind who kept the lights on. He was good. Everyone said so. Clients asked for him. He never talked about it at home. He just came home tired, kissed my forehead, and asked me what I was learning." She stopped, pressed the towel to her mouth for a second, then lowered it. Her eyes glistened, but no tears fell. "When I was 12, she continued, I had a recital. Tacoma Civic Hall, violin." Jack pictured it without trying. A stage washed in bright light. A child's small shoulders under a dark dress. Rows of seats fading into shadow. "I practiced every day," Claire said. "I practiced until my fingers blistered. I thought that if I played perfectly, he would look at me like I mattered more than his work." Jack's throat tightened. "He promised he would be there," she said. "He said it twice. He said it like a vow. I believed him." Claire's mouth pulled into something that was not a smile. Halfway through the program, I looked up and saw the seat he picked out for himself. Third row aisle. He told me the aisle so he could get to me faster after. Her voice cracked on the last word. She cleared her throat quickly like the sound embarrassed her. "The seat was empty," she said. Jack felt his arms loosen from their tight fold, but he did not move. He called, later. Claire went on. "Not even after. During. His boss demanded he stay for an emergency client meeting. My father said yes. He always said yes." Claire's eyes fixed on a spot past Jack's shoulder. Her breathing shortened, then steadied again. "I went home furious," she said. "I told him I did not need him. I told him I hated him for lying. That was the last thing I ever said to him that mattered." Jack's chest tightened. He stayed quiet because any sound felt like it would break something. 3 weeks later, Claire said he died at his desk. The words landed in the kitchen like a dropped plate. Sharp, final. Jack exhaled slowly through his nose, trying to keep his voice steady. "Claire, I built this company from nothing," she said, and now the words spilled out. "I told myself I would never be powerless again. I told myself pressure creates excellence. I told myself sacrifices are how you win." She looked down at her hands as if she could see the years there. "And then I became the person who kept my father at his desk." Jack swallowed. The rain whispered against the windows. Somewhere in the house, a pipe clicked as it cooled. Claire lifted her eyes, and the fear in them sharpened into something like shame. When you asked for time off, when your calendar request said North Sound STEM Expo, when I heard your son's name, it did something to me, she said. I pretended it did not. I acted harder, colder, like I could crush the feeling before it touched me. Jack's voice came out rough. So you took it out on me? Yes, Claire said, immediate and unguarded. And on everyone else. I have been punishing people for my father's choices. I have been punishing him too, even though he is gone. Jack stared at her. He thought of Leo in a hospital bed, the thin tube, the way Leo's voice sounded when he said I couldn't breathe. He thought of Nora, the way she had smiled through pain, so Leo would not be afraid. Grief did not leave. It only changed shape. He spoke quietly. Why tell me now? Claire's shoulders rose with a shaky inhale. Because I opened your file, she said. I looked at what you sent me, and I saw it. Jack blinked. Saw what? A man doing his best with an impossible set of weights, she said. Her voice softened on the last word. Your work is good. It is strong. It is honest. It is not polite. It is close. Jack let out a humorless breath. Close is not what you grade on. Claire's mouth twitched. It might have been the start of a smile. It faded. No. But close means we can finish it. Jack's eyes narrowed. We. Claire stepped closer, careful not to splash water on the floor. I can help, she said. Tonight, right now. Jack stared at her, like she had offered him something that came with a trap. You came to my house to work. I came to my house to stop being someone I cannot live with, Claire said, and her voice shook on the last word. I was going to resign in the morning. I still might, but I saw your email and I could not sleep. I kept thinking of that empty seat. She swallowed. I do not want your son to have one of those. Jack's throat tightened. He looked toward the hallway again, toward the quiet where Leo slept. You don't even know him. Claire's gaze held steady. I know what it looks like when a child waits. Silence settled between them. Not comfortable, not hostile, just heavy with what had been said. Jack rubbed a hand over his face. He felt the grit of exhaustion under his eyes. If you wanted to fire me, he said, this would be a strange way to do it. Claire exhaled. I am not here to fire you. Jack watched her searching for the familiar blade. It was not there. He saw something else. A person standing in his kitchen at midnight with wet hair and trembling hands, holding a story that had poisoned her for years. He nodded toward the table. Then sit. Claire moved to the chair and sat carefully, as if she did not trust the ground to hold her. Jack opened his laptop and pulled up the deck. The screen lit their faces in cool blue. He watched Claire's eyes track across the layout, quick and sharp. The focus was still there, the control too, but her voice when she spoke did not carry the old cruelty. This headline, she said, tapping at the trackpad lightly, it is strong. Keep it. But your opening image is doing the wrong job. Jack leaned in posture tense. It's the hero shot. It is a product shot, Claire corrected. Your story is not about a jacket. It is about what happens inside someone when they decide to leave the safe place. Jack stared at the screen, then back at her. So, what do you want? Claire's eyes met his. A moment, she said, not a thing. Jack's fingers hovered over the keyboard. Show me. Claire blinked, surprised. Jack realized what he had said. He had handed her the wheel. At work, he fought for control because it was all he had. Here at his table with Leo asleep down the hall, he wanted a result, and he wanted it fast. Claire reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. Jack recognized the shape immediately. Printed mock-ups, notes in the margins in tight handwriting. She had come prepared. She slid it across the table. I marked what I would change, she said. Jack unfolded the pages. Red pen circled a photo. Arrows pointed to negative space. A note read, breathe. He stared at the word. Claire's gaze flicked to the hallway again like she could hear Leo's chest through the door. I am sorry, she said quietly, for making you feel like you had to choose. Jack's throat tightened. He did not answer right away. He looked at the notes, at the care in them, at the way every mark had a purpose. Then he said, okay. Claire's shoulders dropped a fraction like she had been bracing for impact, and the blow did not come. They worked. Minutes turned into hours without anyone naming them. Jack swapped out images. Claire adjusted the pacing of the story. He tightened copy. She cut what was pretty but empty. They argued about type weight, about whether a blank margin was powerful or just blank. Their voices stayed low. Their hands moved fast. At one point, Jack reached for the creamer without thinking and poured a small spiral into 2 mugs. Hazelnut rose warm into the air. Claire looked at the mug in front of her, her fingers curled around it. You have this at home, she said. My kid likes it, Jack replied. Claire nodded slowly, like the idea lodged somewhere deep. Around 3, Claire leaned in to point at the screen. Her hair had dried into loose waves. Without the severe ponytail, she looked younger, less like a brand, more like a woman who had been holding her breath for years. Jack caught himself watching her, the way her eyes narrowed when she was thinking, the way her mouth softened when she agreed with something he wrote. Something electric moved under the old anger, not romantic yet, but close enough to make him aware of the space between them. Claire sat back and studied the layout. This she said, and there was something like wonder in her voice. Is what I asked for. Jack let out a quiet breath. So it's enough. Claire looked at him. It's more than enough. A small sound came from the hallway. Jack's body went still. Claire's gaze snapped toward the door. Leo stood there in his pajamas, one hand rubbing his eyes. His hair stuck up at the crown. He looked from Jack to Claire, blinking hard, as if the scene might change if he blinked enough. Dad, he said, voice thick with sleep, why is your boss in our kitchen? Jack stood quickly, moving toward him. Hey, buddy, you okay? Leo nodded, then looked at Claire again with blunt curiosity. Are you the Ice Queen? Jack froze. Claire's brows lifted. Then to Jack's surprise, she laughed. The sound was soft, real, and it made the whole room shift. I am, Claire said. She held out her hand, formal and gentle at the same time. Claire Sterling. Leo stared at her hand like it might bite him, then shook it. His grip was weak but determined. Leo. Claire's gaze softened. It's nice to meet you. Leo yawned, eyes watering. Are you making my dad work? Claire glanced at Jack. Something flickered in her eyes, a quick flash of shame. No, she said. We're finishing something together. Leo looked at Jack, then at the screen. Is it the hiking people? Jack nodded. Rainier. Leo rubbed his nose with his sleeve. Don't stay up too late, he said to Jack, then looked back at Claire. Friday is my expo. Claire's throat moved. I heard, she said quietly. Leo tilted his head. You can come if you want. My city has lights. Jack held his breath. Claire looked at Jack again, asking without words. Jack's chest felt tight, but not with fear this time. If you want to, he said. Claire nodded once. I would like that. Leo's eyes narrowed, suspicious, then he shrugged, with the casual generosity only kids can manage. Okay, he said, but don't be mean. Claire's mouth pulled into a small smile. Fair? Leo turned and shuffled back down the hall. Jack waited until the soft click of Leo's door. He looked back at Claire. For a second, neither of them spoke. The rain had eased, but it still whispered against the window. Claire's voice came out low. He is good, she said. Jack nodded. He is. Claire looked down at the table, at the layout, at her own hands wrapped around the mug. I do not know how to do this, she admitted. Jack's throat tightened. Do what? Be the kind of person a kid invites, she said. Jack stared at her, and the anger he had carried for weeks shifted into something else. Something quieter, something harder to name. He tapped the trackpad and brought the final slide into view. The deck looked clean, bold, alive. Then start here, Jack said, and his voice stayed steady. With the work, with the honesty, with showing up. Claire nodded. She set her mug down and leaned forward again. Okay, she said. Send the updated file to me. Then go sleep for an hour. You have a morning. Jack did not argue. He attached the final deck and hit send. The laptop made a soft chime. The email disappeared into the night. Outside the kitchen window, the sky had shifted from black to a thin washed gray. The rain kept falling, but softer now, like it was tired too. Jack closed the laptop and sat back, shoulders aching, eyes burning. Claire watched him for a moment, her expression unreadable. Then she reached for the towel on the chair and placed it neatly on the counter, as if order could steady her hands. Jack, she said. He looked at her. I am sorry, she said again, and this time the words did not sound forced. They sounded like they had finally found the right place to land. Jack swallowed. He nodded once. The house stayed quiet. Leo slept down the hall. The scent of hazelnut lingered in the air. 2 mugs sat on the table beside a finished deck, cooling in the pale light. The kitchen clock clicked toward 5 as the gray light outside thickened into morning. Jack sat with his forearms on the table, eyes gritty, shoulders locked. Claire stayed in the chair opposite him, both hands wrapped around her cooling mug, as if warmth could anchor her. Neither of them spoke for a while. The house felt suspended, balanced on the quiet line between Leo asleep down the hall and the deck that had already left Jack's outbox. Jack broke the silence first. We should go in early. Claire nodded once. I already messaged Tessa. Rainier moved the meeting up. 8:30. Jack stared at her. They moved it up. They want to lock their launch timeline, Claire said. Her voice had its usual control, but the edges were softened, worn down by the night. "You will be there by 7:30. I will be there before you." Jack let out a small breath. Of course. Claire's mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but the attempt mattered. She stood smoothing her damp hair back with her fingers. The motion was practical, not polished. She glanced toward the hallway again, then back at Jack. "I should leave," she said. Jack stood too, rubbing a hand over his face. "You can take a cab." Claire looked at his keys on the counter. "I can drive." "It's still dark," Jack replied. Claire's eyes met his. "I've driven in worse than rain." Jack nodded. He walked her to the door. Outside, the porch boards were slick. The broken planter sat in pieces, white shards, and spilled soil, a small wreck in the dawn. Claire paused and looked down at it. "I'll replace it." Jack shook his head once. "It's just a pot." Claire's gaze stayed on the pieces a beat longer, as if she heard something else in those words. Then she stepped down into the wet morning and walked to her car. Jack locked the door and leaned his forehead against the wood for a moment. He listened for Leo's breathing again. He heard it. He let his shoulders drop a fraction. Then he moved. He left a note on the counter for Rosa in quick block letters. "Leo is asleep. Inhaler and backpack. I will be at the expo." He checked Leo one more time, pulling the blanket up gently when he saw a bare shoulder. Leo did not wake. His breathing stayed even. Jack showered in under 5 minutes, dressed in clothes that were clean but wrinkled, and drove into the city with the sky still pale. Seattle looked washed and quiet, streets shining puddles holding the reflection of traffic lights like small coins. At Sterling and Coney, the lobby felt sharper than usual. Too bright, too awake. Jack's badge beeped at the turnstile. He stepped into the elevator, watched the numbers climb, felt his stomach tighten with each floor. On the creative level, Claire was already there. She stood near the conference wing with a folder tucked under her arm, hair pulled back again, suit clean and perfect as if the night had not happened. But her eyes gave her away. Not red now, just alert in a new way, like she was seeing the room instead of controlling it. Tessa approached them with a tablet and a tight smile. "Rainier's team is in room 2. They brought legal and brand. They look ready to sign if we keep them excited." Claire nodded. "We will." Tessa glanced at Jack. "You good?" Jack swallowed. "Yeah." Tessa stepped away, already fielding a call. Claire turned to Jack and lowered her voice. "You talk through the story. I will handle objections." Jack studied her face. "You trust me." Claire held his gaze. "You earned it." The doors opened, and the Rainier team filed in. 5 people all dressed like they could hike a mountain after the meeting. Their skin looked wind-kissed, their hands rougher than most clients Jack had met. The leader, a woman named Marin, shook hands firmly and sat down with the ease of someone who spent time outdoors on purpose. "Morning," Marin said. Her eyes went to the screen. "Let's see it." Jack clicked the first slide. The opening image filled the wall screen. Not a product, a moment. A lone figure at a trailhead hood, up-breath visible in cold air, the forest ahead, dark and inviting. The headline was simple, bold, and slightly dangerous. Marin leaned forward without realizing she was doing it. Jack felt his pulse steady as he spoke. He did not pitch like a salesman. He told a story. He described the shift from inside to outside, the way a person changes when the air changes. He tied the visuals to the brand promise without strangling it. He kept his voice calm, letting the work carry the emotion. Claire watched the room, tracking reactions. When Marin's teammate asked about product emphasis, Claire answered cleanly. "We build desire first. Then we deliver the product as the proof." A man in legal cleared his throat. The language is aggressive. Jack started to respond. Then Claire placed a hand lightly on the table, a small signal. She spoke instead, and her tone was steady but human. "It's not aggressive. It's honest. People do not buy Rainier to stay comfortable." Marin's mouth lifted at that. Exactly. Slide by slide, the room warmed. Heads nodded. Someone laughed quietly at a line of copy that landed just right. When Jack showed the final layout, the one with the clean negative space that felt like a held breath, Marin sat back and looked at Claire. "This feels like us," she said. "It feels like what we say in our heads but never put on a billboard." Claire did not smile wide. She only nodded. "Then it will work." Marin turned to her team. "Thoughts?" The brand lead pointed at the screen. "I like the restraint. It makes the images louder." Legal side, "We can make it work." Marin looked at Jack. "How fast can you deliver production files?" Jack had an answer ready. "End of day Monday." Marin nodded once, decisive. "Good. Then we're in." The simple statement hit Jack harder than applause would have. His shoulders loosened. He realized he had been braced for failure for so long that success felt unfamiliar. They shook hands. Papers slid across the table. Tessa moved like a conductor, collecting signatures, confirming timelines, smiling with her eyes. As the Rainier team left, Marin paused near the door and looked at Jack again. "Nice work," she said. Jack managed a small smile. "Thank you." When the door clicked shut, Jack let out a breath he did not know he was holding. He turned to Claire. "We did it." Claire's eyes held on him. "You did." Tessa approached with a new flurry of messages. They want a few alternate taglines and a social cut-down package. Quick turnaround. Claire took the tablet scanning. Jack waited for the old behavior, the instant tightening, the demand that everything be perfect at any cost. Instead, Claire looked at Jack and said, "Go." Jack blinked. "What?" The expo, Claire said, as if the word belonged in her mouth now. "Go. I will handle follow-up." Jack stared at her. "Are you sure?" Claire's gaze softened. She reached up and straightened his tie with a precise, gentle tug. The gesture was intimate in a way neither of them acknowledged. "Yes," she said. "Be there." Jack's throat tightened. "Claire, about last night." Claire stepped back, holding his gaze for a beat. "Not now," she said quietly. "Right now you have a promise to keep." Jack nodded once, then grabbed his bag and moved fast, as if hesitating would make the door close. By the time he reached Westlake Middle, the gym was already buzzing. Folding tables lined the walls. Poster boards rose like little billboards of teenage hope. The air smelled like glue markers and cafeteria floor cleaner. Jack spotted Leo near the center, standing stiffly behind his display. Leo wore a hoodie and jeans, hair combed but still rebellious at the crown. His model city sat on the table in front of him, lights-ready bridges placed streets straight. He was rearranging the label card for the third time. Jack slowed, suddenly afraid that Leo would look up and not believe what he was seeing. Leo lifted his head. His face changed instantly, like someone had turned a light on behind his eyes. "You came," he said, and his voice cracked on the word. Jack crossed the distance and pulled him into a hug, careful of the table. Leo clung for a second longer than a teenager was supposed to, then stepped back quickly, pretending he needed to adjust his display. "I promise," Jack said. Leo looked at him, hands-hearted, searching for the hidden catch. Then he nodded once, slow. "Okay," he said, but this time the word did not close a door. It opened one. Judges moved from table to table with clipboards. Parents leaned in, smiling, snapping photos. Jack stayed close, reading Leo's poster, asking questions he already knew the answers to, just to watch Leo talk. Leo's shoulders relaxed as he explained airflow and solar placement and why trees mattered in an urban grid. A judge with silver hair and kind eyes leaned in. "Tell me why you placed the solar panels here." Leo answered without rushing. Jack watched him and felt something settle inside his chest. Pride, yes. Relief, too. A quiet gratitude that he had not missed this. When the awards were announced, the gym quieted in uneven waves. Names were called. Clapping echoed off the walls. Leo's hands clenched, then unclenched. Second place overall, the announcer said Leo Monroe. Leo froze. Jack's hands found Leo's shoulders and squeezed. "That's you," he whispered. Leo walked forward like he was moving through water. He accepted the medal with both hands, cheeks flushed, eyes wide. When he returned, he held it up to Jack, breathless. "I got second." Jack laughed, a real sound that startled him. "You earned it." Leo's smile was bright enough to change the room around him. As the crowd began to thin, Jack felt a presence at his side. He turned. Claire stood near the edge of the gym, elegant in a suit that looked out of place among hoodies and sneakers. Her hair was pulled back, her posture straight, but her eyes moved across the room with a flicker of uncertainty, like she was stepping onto unfamiliar ground. Jack's voice came out low. "You came." Claire nodded. "I said I would." Before Jack could say more, Leo spotted her and marched over metal, bouncing lightly against his chest. "Claire," Leo said, using her name like he had always had the right. "Did you see my city?" Claire crouched slightly to meet his height, without making a show of it. "I did," she said, and her voice was warm in a way Jack had never heard at work. "It's impressive." Leo's smile turned proud. "The bridge holds. It's tension." Claire studied the bridge like she meant it. "That's smart engineering." Leo beamed. Jack watched Claire's face as she spoke to his son. The way her eyes softened. The way her jaw unclenched. The way she did not seem to know what to do with the feeling and did not run from it. Leo glanced between them, quick and sharp. "We should get ice cream," he announced, like it was the obvious next step after winning second place. He looked at Jack. "To celebrate." Jack nodded. "That sounds perfect." Leo turned to Claire with blunt confidence. "Do you want to come?" Claire's gaze flicked to Jack, asking permission without words. Jack felt something shift inside him, a door opening. "If you want to," he said. Claire nodded once. "I would like that." The ice cream shop was warm and loud, smelling of sugar and waffle cones. Families crowded small tables. Teenagers laughed in a corner booth. Leo ordered chocolate fudge and insisted on extra sprinkles. Jack ordered coffee flavor out of habit. Claire stood at the counter scanning the menu like it was a contract she was afraid to misunderstand. "Vanilla," she said finally. Leo stared at her. "Just vanilla." Claire lifted a brow. "Yes." Leo nodded as if that explained something about her. They sat at a small table by the window. Rain streaked the glass outside. The shop's lights made the street look softer. Leo took a big bite and spoke with his mouth half full. "Are you still going to make my dad work all night?" Jack's shoulders tensed. "Leo." Claire held up a hand, calm. "It's a fair question." Leo looked at her serious. He was really tired and sad. Jack felt heat rise behind his eyes. He looked down at his cup and tightened his grip around it. Claire's gaze met Jack's across the table. Something passed there, quiet and heavy. She looked back at Leo. "No," Claire said. "I'm not going to do that." Leo nodded once as if filing the information. "Good." Claire's voice dropped slightly. "I'm sorry I did before." Leo shrugged with a kind of blunt mercy adults rarely earned. "It's okay. Dad says sometimes people act mean because they're hurting inside." The words landed in the small space between them. Claire went still. Her spoon paused above her vanilla. Jack watched her swallow, watched her blink once, slow as if she was trying to keep her face together. "Your dad is right," Claire said quietly, and her voice did not sound like a performance. Leo took another bite, satisfied, already moving on. "My city is going to be bigger next year," he said, launching into new plans with the unstoppable optimism of a kid who had been seen today. Jack listened, letting Leo's voice fill the space. He glanced at Claire and saw her watching Leo as if she was learning a language she had forgotten. Outside, rain continued to fall. Inside, the three of them sat at a small table, cups sweating onto napkins, the air warm with sugar and quiet relief. Jack felt the tightness in his chest ease just a little, as if his body was finally allowing him to breathe. They finished their ice cream slowly. Leo talked with his hands, describing next year's upgrades like a foreman with a blueprint. Claire listened, spoon-tapping the rim of her cup once in a while, eyes steady on him. Jack watched the two of them more than he watched the rain. When they stepped back outside, the air was cold and clean. Streetlights turned the wet pavement into a ribbon of copper. Leo walked between them, metal bouncing lightly against his chest, and kept glancing up as if checking that both adults were still there. At Jack's front steps, Leo yawned hard and leaned into Jack's side. "I'm tired," he admitted. "Good tired," Jack said, brushing Leo's hair back. Claire hovered on the walkway for a moment, hands in her coat pockets, unsure where to put herself now that the bright noise of the shop was gone. The porch light washed her face in warm yellow. She looked different in it, less sharp around the edges. Leo looked at her. "You're not as scary outside of work." Claire blinked, then nodded, as if accepting a new label. "I'll take that." Leo shuffled inside without waiting, already half asleep on his feet. Jack followed him in, helped him wash his hands, guided him to bed. The inhaler sat on the nightstand, like a quiet guard. Leo's breathing stayed easy. When Jack returned to the living room, Claire was still there, standing near the entry table. Her gaze had landed on the broken planter outside, the pieces visible through the window. Soil smeared the porch boards like a bruise. "I shouldn't have come like that," she said softly. "So late." Jack leaned against the wall, tired down to the bone. "I'm glad you did." Claire's eyes lifted to his, and something moved through her expression. Relief, maybe, or permission. "I'll see you Monday," she said. Jack nodded. "Drive safe." Claire reached for the doorknob, paused, then looked back. "Jack." "Yeah. I meant what I said," she replied. "About being sorry." Jack swallowed. "I know." Claire stepped out into the rain again, and Jack closed the door behind her with a gentle click. The house stayed quiet. The porch light kept watch. On Monday, the creative floor felt the same at first. The neon sign, the glass walls, the hum of machines and keyboards. But then Claire sent a company-wide email at 8:02 a.m. No subject line in all caps. No threat tucked between sentences. It was short. Effective immediately, no internal emails after 700 p.m. unless urgent. Project timelines will include protected personal time when requested in advance. Managers will plan for it, not punish it. We make great work by having people who can breathe. Jack stared at the last word. Around him, heads popped up over monitors. People reread the message like it might change if they blinked. Tessa walked past Jack's desk with a tablet in hand and whispered, "Did you see this?" Jack nodded once, not trusting his voice. That morning, Claire called a meeting not in the big glass conference room, but in the open collaboration space, where the couches were slightly worn, and the coffee machine was always a little too loud. She stood with a mug in her hands, hazelnut, no tablet, no white suit, a simple dark sweater instead. "We have been running like we are outrunning something," she said. "We're done with that." A few people exchanged glances. Someone cleared their throat and looked down. Claire's eyes moved across the team, and when they passed over Jack, her gaze held for a beat. Not a spotlight, not a command, just acknowledgement. Jack went home on time that night. He sat at the dining table while Leo worked on homework. They ate dinner before the sky went fully dark. Leo talked about school and laughed once at a joke Jack did not fully understand. Jack laughed anyway because the sound was worth it. Over the next few weeks, Claire changed in small, visible ways. She started asking questions that were not traps. She walked the floor and listened. When a junior designer apologized for leaving early for a parent-teacher meeting, Claire only said, "Tell your kid. I hope they do great." Work got better too, not softer, better. Jack's Rainier campaign launched with a clean burn across the city, posters on bus shelters and billboards that felt like cold air. Rainier sent a thank you package that smelled like pine, a jacket for Jack, a smaller one for Leo, and a handwritten note from Marin that read, "This one made us feel seen." Claire promoted Jack to creative lead before summer hit, not with a dramatic announcement, but with a simple conversation in her office. "You lead well," she said, sliding a new contract across her desk. "And you have a life that matters." Jack looked at the number on the page and felt his chest tighten. He lifted his eyes. "Thank you." Claire held his gaze. "Do not thank me for doing what I should have done sooner." Their professional rhythm sharpened into something easy. They argued about fonts and pacing. They laughed, sometimes quick and surprised, like the sounds still startled them. Meetings that began as coffee runs stretched into lunches. Lunches became walks after work, along wet sidewalks, talking about everything except deadlines, until one of them finally said what both of them were already carrying. One evening, Jack invited Claire to dinner at his house. Not takeout on the counter, not a laptop open between them, an actual table set with plates that matched. Claire stood on the porch in a simple coat hair and on a paper bag in her hands. "I brought dessert," she said like she was showing credentials. Leo opened the door behind Jack and grinned. "Vanilla." Claire lifted her brows. "It's a classic." Leo nodded, satisfied, then ran back to the kitchen to help, which mostly meant stealing a piece of garlic bread when Jack wasn't looking. Dinner was loud in a small way. Leo talked about a new idea for his city model. Jack poured water and watched Claire laugh when Leo corrected her on a detail about solar placement. Claire washed dishes afterward without being asked. The sight of her hands in soapy water sleeves pushed up felt stranger than any boardroom moment. When Leo went to bed, Jack and Claire sat on the porch steps. The air smelled of wet earth and cut grass from a neighbor's yard. A wind chime clicked softly in the distance. Claire stared out at the street, at the quiet houses, at the dark windows. "I used to think home was a distraction," she said. Jack did not interrupt. "I thought success was the only thing that couldn't leave," she continued. "Then I stood in this house and heard your son ask me not to be mean." Jack's throat tightened. He reached for her hand and felt how cold her fingers were, even in summer. "I almost resigned that night," Claire said. Jack nodded. "I figured." Claire looked at him. "You opened the door anyway." Jack turned his hand so their fingers fit together. "I needed someone to see me, not my job title, not my output." Claire's eyes shone, but she blinked it back. "I'm still learning." "So am I," Jack said and leaned in. The kiss was soft and careful, like they were both checking whether the world would allow it. It did. By winter, Claire's downtown apartment looked untouched most of the time. Her coat hung on Jack's hook by the door, more often than not. Leo stopped calling her your boss and started calling her Claire, as if it had always been that simple. On a cold night in December, Jack and Leo decorated a small tree in the living room. The lights blinked softly, reflecting in the window like tiny stars trapped indoors. Claire stood near the couch, holding the tree topper, a simple star that had belonged to Nora. "The star goes on top, right?" Claire asked, voice careful. "Voice careful?" "Family tradition," Jack said. Leo climbed onto the arm of the couch and watched his father with a look that was too knowing for 13. "The newest family member gets to do it," he announced. Claire froze with the star in her hands. Jack sat beside her and took her fingers, gently turning them palm up as if he was reading something there. He set a folded paper onto her hand, an old permission slip from the expo smoothed flat Jack's signature still dark at the bottom. Claire looked down, confused. Jack opened a small velvet box. Inside was a sapphire ring, deep blue and simple, the color of winter water under streetlights. "This was my mother's," Jack said. She wore it when she built a life out of nothing but work and stubborn hope. Claire's breath caught. Jack's voice stayed low. I want you here, in this house, in our days, not as a guest. Leo nodded solemnly. We voted. Claire let out a shaky laugh that turned into a quiet sob she did not try to hide. She looked from Leo to Jack and back again like she was afraid the scene would vanish. Yes, she whispered. Yes. Jack slid the ring onto her finger. Claire pressed her other hand over it, holding it in place like it was real only as long as she touched it. In spring, they married in a community garden, near the water, where rain was a possibility, and nobody seemed to mind. The chairs were simple, the flowers were local. Leo stood beside Jack in a clean shirt and nervous pride. Claire walked toward them in a white dress that moved easily when the wind picked up. Her hair was down soft around her face. Jack watched her approach and felt his throat tighten, with the familiar ache of love and loss living in the same chest. After the vows, Leo stepped forward and hugged them both, at once arms wrapping tight. The guests laughed softly and someone wiped their eyes. Later, when the reception thinned and the garden lights glowed low, Claire stood near Jack's porch again, not drenched this time, not trembling. The broken planter had been repaired and placed back by the steps. The crack was still visible, traced with a thin line of gold paint that caught the porch light. Claire touched the repaired seam with her fingertips, then looked at Jack. You kept it, she said. Jack nodded. It still holds. Claire leaned into him, and Jack pulled her close. Inside, Leo's laughter drifted from the kitchen. Outside, the rain started again, soft and steady, tapping the world into place. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story.